and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I've decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, social media, TV in general, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is being said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, we have Kim Searle, and we are going to talk about going through a midlife crisis. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Sophie. Thank you very much.
Lovely. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. It's a bit blustery, but it's a good day.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. So I'm recently gone out to be self-employed after working in a corporate environment for many years and basically experiencing corporate burnout, where I just couldn't do anything, get out of bed. I didn't want to go in. Everything was really hard work. And for a long time, I'd been working towards this idea of working for myself. So I'd already trained in hypnotherapy and all the other good skill sets. So I'd had the skills, I just needed the business. But I was taken out by glandular fever last year as a result of the corporate burnout. And it made me sit up, take notice and realize I've got to change my life. So
what do you do now then?
So now I have written a book around midlife. Midlife is not a crisis. Rediscover your drive and reclaim your happiness. And I wrote that while I was at work. And the idea is that I would help others who are going through this midlife crisis as it is. I've said it's not a crisis because I believe it's a wake-up call for us. A wake-up call for us to look at what we're doing, where we are, and, where we're going almost. I think.
So you, in your own journey, have gone through a few crises yourself, haven't you? Can you tell us a bit more about what happened to you?
Yes, of course. As I said, it's a bit of a wake-up call at this time of our lives. When we're teenagers, we're all geared into making future decisions and what we want to do, and that's it. And then we're off. And we never really review that properly unless there's a big event. And
in fact, I would even argue we take these decisions based on everybody else and what they think as opposed to what we really want to do, which is probably also why when you get to your 40s, you go, well, hang on a minute, there's got to be more to life than this.
I agree, completely agree. And thank you. Nail on the head, as they say. We're conditioned from the moment, even before we're born, I personally believe, we start to be conditioned in the womb about what our life is going to be like, or what our world is like. So because baby's already picking up on the sounds of mum, they're picking up on the light and all that good stuff. So whatever mum experiences, baby experiences in my world. So I think we're conditioned from a very early age, and we're conditioned according to our parents' conditioning and our teachers' conditioning and our friends' conditioning. So it's not us, but we've learned this is the way it is. And of course, by the time we get to our teenage years, we're applying that knowledge for our future. By the time we get into our 30s and 40s, because midlife is all relative, we're established in some way. And then some big event may come along. And for me, it was at 36 when I basically had my first sort of burnout, if you like. I was emotionally, physically, mentally and spiritually overdrawn. I had nothing else I could give. I remember standing at the kitchen counter making the children's lunch boxes and thinking, I can't do this. And my ex said to me, what? And I had to repeat it. I can't do this anymore. And I got to the point where I had no choice. And decisions had to be made. And, we ended up splitting and divorcing. It wasn't the best of times for either of us, I must admit. And I made decisions in an emotional state. Never good.
Yeah,
never good. No,
See,
because you're doing it.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah, no.
thinking out loud here. My midlife crisis, I often say, was at 29, which a lot of people say, well, that's not really midlife. But for me, I suppose it kind of was, because it was more of a realization that if I carried on doing what I was doing, I wasn't necessarily going to where I wanted to go. Not that I knew what that was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that.
And I think you're right. You know, you couldn't. It's called midlife. Who's to say that 29 is not midway through your life? Because it could be. Well, exactly. But I guess it's just saying that that you've got somewhere in your life that says, actually, hold on a moment, what's going on? And something will have triggered that. Everybody has a trigger. I've broadly put it as divorce or bereavement, because, you know, you lose somebody, doesn't matter who it is. That can be a real wake-up call. What am I doing with my life? Redundancy for older parents, you know, the empty nest syndrome, suddenly aging parents.
You know, as we're talking, and obviously it's making me think as well, but I generally think sometimes we call it midlife crisis because it's pretty much when the kids, because most people will have kids, it's pretty much when the kids have got to that certain age where they got some form of independence, really, or where mummy and daddy are not so important anymore. They'd rather go out with their mates. Yeah. And where, in essence, we then look at ourselves and think, oh, am I needed? No, I'm not by them. And then you start looking around. And I think that's probably why it's called midlife in that, because, you know, most people would have had their kids at a particular time in their life, give or take. So you get to a certain point in your life where you come to that realization because you've got to move on to the next chapter and you don't know what that is.
I think that's beautifully said. It's a point in your life, midlife or otherwise, when you're ready for the next chapter, whatever that next chapter is. And I think, you know, that's a beautiful way of putting it. So I'm going to pinch that, if that's right.
That's fine, you carry on.
That's really good. So absolutely, it's the next chapter of your life. And I think traditionally it has been something like that, you know, and you know, in the past, probably for people in their 40s. But I think younger people are questioning more and more. And I think it's that questioning that's really going on underneath the surface. And it's, you know, we're talking about the relationship with ourselves. We have been conditioned. We're expected to get a job. We're expected to, you know, get a home, you know, maybe have a family. That's not for everyone. And then after that, it's like, what next? You know, it's not the pipe and slippers brigade anymore.
Yeah, when you say about like the younger people, I think that's not even a sentence, but that's the best way I can put it. It's because there's so much to say about that. I think there's a part of me where I can see certain even millennials are questioning certain things more than my generation probably did, in terms of, like, you know, we want to protect the planet, and whilst it was something that I recall what I wanted to do and all the rest of it, it wasn't the same because it was in a different state. So they've got things that, you know, they can question a lot better at a younger age than maybe we could. But in the next breath, I still see, for instance, in terms of the obvious relationships, that they will go for the pretty girl or the pretty boy. You know, they still look at the gene pool and the nice, you know, wedding photos, as opposed to the long term, actually, can I spend the rest of my life with that person?
I agree. And unfortunately, I could work with that generation, but I know a lot of people who've trained in what I do work with that generation. So the more we can educate people, the better, I think, because one of the beauties, certainly of the work I do with clients that I see, is that I'm not just working with them, because I'm a great believer that whatever changes them changes the people around them in a good way, because I'm only ever about the ethics around this and making sure it's positive and, you know, doing the right thing for the right people. But it does change the people around them, and nobody understands quite what's happened. But it's because it's come from a really deep part that the external behavior changes. So you know, if we can change people in this midlife group, be it from 29 to 69, what an influence that will have on the wider network that they're linking into. So the more we can do that, wherever we can do it, the better. Because I don't think youngsters are really interested in all this stuff. They're still busy having fun, and why not? Let them, but they'll be influenced.
Yeah, when you say about the wider network, I think that the person I've seen it, because it's someone I see regularly, obviously, the most is one of my neighbours who, you know, through various reasons and without going into details, her life in the last 2 or 3 years has quite dramatically changed. But I think that, for instance, all the negative people she had around her have kind of fallen off the cliff anyway, because she's not the person they knew, and they don't want to entertain someone who's all of a sudden quite positive, because they want to be able to maybe moan. Do you know what I mean? So I think that, yes, indeed, when we change ourselves, everything we do as a consequence, the minute you make a decision, you know, it's like domino effect. The dominoes will fall and you will get a consequence, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the work that I'm talking about, that I do with my clients, and what I'm saying in the book is, it's our decisions and choices in every minute of every day, and some of which we are not aware of, that actually result in what we're experiencing in our world. So if our world is not good, there is something about what we're doing that's not working for us. And that's where I start to unpick it and find out what's going on. You know, what's the emotional content? What's the thought processes that you're going through? Maybe some physical stuff like habits and whatever. These are the things that contribute to our external world.
To you, would you say there's a difference between what I'd call a normal crisis and a midlife crisis?
It's a very good question. And my gut feel is no.
Okay.
I've called it midlife because that's where I think a lot of people experience crisis, and it encapsulates what a crisis can be like. It's this moment when your world has been rocked to such a degree that you are questioning everything. People who are younger, so let's go with the 20-somethings, are better able to handle it. They've got a lot of years ahead of them. They can change career really quickly. They can jump from one relationship to another. Not necessarily easy, but in a better way, because they've still got a lot of time ahead of them. By the time you get to your 40s, it's quite so easy. You know, your childbearing years, if they've not come to an end, then they're not much longer. Certainly changing careers becomes harder, not impossible, but harder. And, you know, if you do end a relationship, suddenly, you know, you're looking at a different pool of people to pull upon. So I think the midlife stuff just is a bit more challenging to deal with than the same crisis had it occurred 20 years earlier. Does that make sense? So I think crisis is crisis. It's just the timing of it that results in how we deal with it.
And what do you think? I mean, you mentioned earlier bereavement, splitting up, you know, burnout. But what are the normal triggers, shall we say?
Well, the more obvious ones that people do associate for women is the menopause. The hormonal changes of no longer being able to have children, or the children leaving home. So very much around that element will be a big trigger for women. It's not the only one, obviously. And for men, they do actually go through their own form of menopause. I think it's called andropause. And it won't be the same, because theirs is longer and less impactful, because it's the testosterone that starts to decline, I think from about their late 30s, actually, but it goes on till they're 70. So it's a longer period, whereas ours is pretty sharp. It's probably about 5 or 10 years. So I think for me, you know, those are the two big ones, where suddenly it's an age thing is the other one.
I'm thinking, because of what you just said, sorry, but this is what this is about.
That's right. It is what it's about.
When you say about the menopause, because I had to go through it 18 months ago, something like that. It was medically induced. But one of the things that I found, because it was medically induced, 1 minute I was fine. Literally the next morning I wanted to kill the world. Because it was that rush of hormones, you know, the implant that we put in needed to last for 28 days. So every 28 days I had to go back to get another one in. But what I'm trying to say is that one of the things that I found that's really stayed with me, and that most people who go through the menopause say, is that, I apologise, I'm just about to swear, the bullshit factor kind of like all of a sudden you can't bear it. and you become so, you just say it as it is. And I think that a lot of the time people then think that you're abrupt, and that's why I think menopausal women are normally told, or that they're too opinionated, and they just attack you for no reason. But I think it's that all of a sudden you're like, I can't take this.
Yeah.
This is rubbish. I'm not doing that. And I think it's like this wake up call that actually the only person I've got to please is myself. I don't have to please the world just because,
Yeah. And I think that does happen a lot. I mean, a lot of women, emotionally are challenged, shall we say, during this whole period. And by the time they come out the other side, they're just like past it. They're not going to put up with idiots. They're not going to tolerate things that they at one time they did tolerate. I mean, their role has changed almost in that period, if not sooner. So, yeah, I think a lot of women do start to stand up for themselves. And I think it's a good thing. It's a shame we can't encourage that confidence and ability to be more ourselves earlier, and let our younger women know that they're important in more than just one way.
At the same time, don't you think that it's actually a process? Because I know that, especially in the personal development kind of circles, it's all about positivity and this, that, and the other. But I personally believe that, it's a will. And the law of physics says that a wheel will go down and go back up. It's just the way it works. And I don't think that anyone can have just positive stuff all the time. I think that, you have to go through a process to then learn the lesson, so to speak, get some positive stuff out of it, and then start the next one. And I can't remember where I'm going with this story, but more towards when you said, the younger people, if we could learn at a younger age. But I think that it's a process. We kind of got to go through it.
And you're absolutely right. It's an ideal world to help the younger people, because it's not just women. I'm finding that 30% of my clients are men who, for whatever reason, experience the same sort of issues, just differently. It's an ideal world.
To talk, for starters. So
yeah, absolutely. But I love what you're saying, because for me, there is a process, and as human beings, we are unique. Each of us is unique. We are all treading our own journey. So, these learnings and these processes will be done in our lifetime when we're ready for it. So it's just so happens that in the past, it's usually been midlife, but that is potentially why perhaps people are experiencing it younger,
because you're
ready, older.
You're kind of
ready to go through that process,
as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing that I personally find as well with some of my clients, which is that people, because of routine, because we've got to get the kids to school and whatever, and then the kids grow up, and then they end up in this kind of I'm not going to call it limbo land, but they're together, they know each other very well, they know how to take their tea, they know how their toast should be buttered, they know all of that. But there's a lack of communication, because we don't talk about what's important anymore, because we've been stuck in that routine and in that kind of must do this, must do that. And they forget who they are. And
Absolutely.
That's one of the number one thing that I see, is that people are like, I don't actually know who I am anymore.
And it's I often say it's the big questions that we start asking ourselves. Who am I? What am I doing? And where am I going? And what's happened is they've stopped growing. As human beings, we're naturally curious. We naturally like to learn things, and we've stopped. And that's where we've started to atrophy. And I don't mean physically here. I'm talking mentally and possibly even emotionally, spiritually, if you're so inclined. We started to atrophy, and that's not a good space to be in. So I think it's a really good wake up call to say, hello, what are you doing? It's our inner self saying, we wanted so much more from life. Where's that 20-year-old who wanted to conquer the world? Where's that 30-year-old who wanted to travel the world? It doesn't matter. They're ready to be heard and to step up and come out. Definitely.
And would you say that a lot of the time, when you've got a midlife crisis, it just starts with a bit of a kind of feeling, where something's not quite right, something, even wrong. But you can't put your finger on it, and you just think, maybe it's just me, or is it just me? What would you say How does it happen in your experience with the people that you deal with?
I think they don't see it coming.
Mm.
I think other people see it coming because they will be displaying behaviours that let people know that they're not happy. In fact, it was a comment from my sister that triggered my first one, and she said to me, "You're always moaning. What's happened to you?" And I had no clue that was going on. So other people tend to spot it before you do. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is. They just know something's not right. And I think it's become insidious. You don't even know that if for want of a better phrase, the rot set in somewhere, and your life isn't going quite where you want. And you just need a succession of those messages that start to let you know. And sometimes you ignore them. You know, I'm married, or I've got this good job, I can't give up, and you just keep going. But there comes a point, like I did last year, where actually the signs are just shouting at you, and your body will take you out. Your unconscious will say, enough's enough. And that's when the crisis really hits home, and you think, right, okay, I've got to do something.
Because, as I say, I feel that I had my midlife crisis at 29. And the reason why was because, I was in a job, well, obviously I was going to turn 30. So I was starting to question a lot of things, like, having kids, I was single, I was drinking a fair amount, I was smoking a large amount. So there was all these things, and that's what really triggered, okay, what should I do to secure myself and, put my money somewhere that, I'm going to be safe, blah, blah, blah. And that's why I see it as a midlife crisis, because it is what made me change what I was doing. Not necessarily straight away, I didn't, for instance, retrain straight away or anything like that, but that was the start of a trigger. But the actual crisis that you're describing, I had 4 years ago, but I don't see that as a midlife crisis, which is interesting, really.
Yeah, it might have been accumulation of that first trigger.
I was nervous breakdown. It was just like, I was taken out straight away. There was just nothing I could do for 3 weeks. I couldn't move. Well, I could move, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it so often happens. It's because you've not been listening. You may have done some change and then thought you were okay. No, you hadn't made enough changes.
No, this is it. And it was like pushed onto you, sort of thing.
Yeah, because your unconscious mind, or if you're that way inclined, your soul and your higher self and whatever, they say, no, you're not living the life you can lead. You're not being kind to yourself. You're not looking after you. And you wanted to do so many things, and you can do more, because actually I think we're on this earth to help each other grow and develop and live the life, whatever. So you're helping people in your way with this podcast and seeing your clients. You sometimes need to be pushed to do the right things so you can do more to help. So I think that's what mine was.
And in your experience, so let's just say you have this crisis, and let's just say that for a number of years you carry on experiences more and more and more and more and more issues.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
I'd say wake up and listen. Because the divorce that I had at 36, the house move and the job change, I repeated 3 times, Sophie, for goodness sake. And it was only the 3rd time I was like, what on earth is going on here? Why am I doing this again? What is that about? And it's taken a long time to get me back on track. 10 years probably. But boy, I'm in such a better place now, but not complete. I didn't do everything because I didn't sort the job out. I've sorted my home out. I'm now in my own home, which was one of the things that I needed, and in a nice environment. I'm not in a relationship, and that's through choice, because I don't have the time or energy for one at the moment, because I'm still working through stuff in terms of getting myself the business set up and get my name known. And I think sometimes you have to go through it. So the one thing I hadn't sorted out was my work, and that was the thing that's my health, which I'm doing now. Yeah. So hopefully when I've done this, I will have done my midlife crisis and I can start to enjoy the latter part of my life. And I think that's the other big message. People sort of seem to think they're on the slippery slope, once they get past 50. Oh boy, there is such a world out there. I did a lot of interviews for my book, and I never put them in the book in the end, just because I well, I didn't, and I'll explain that another time if people want to know. But I was talking to accountants and holiday firms and hotels and whatever, and people are investing in more fun things. So adventure holidays are on the up. People who are older are doing more adventurous holidays. So the insurance companies must be doing well. People are more aware of their pensions and are prepared to do more work, change jobs to do work that really excites them and pleases them. So more of them doing that. There's a whole life just waiting for us once we cross that.
And I think,
Rubicon.
the way it was best explained to me was with Dr. Wayne Dyer, and how he explains that, in the morning of your life, meaning when you're young, you go for the things, that material, you look for status, you look for all that sort of stuff, because you want money and you want a good job and you want to be recognized for what you've achieved and blah blah blah. And then he explains how in the afternoon of your life, which is in essence the time we're discussing, the midlife crisis point, you realize that actually there's more to it than just the money, the status. And I think this is why, as you just said, you get more people going on adventure holidays, blah, blah, blah. And then what he says is that at the evening, so when you're old, proper old, you then realise it was a lie, what you were told in the morning, and that it isn't about materialistic stuff. It is about emotions. It is about the people that you touch. It is about, the experiences and the memories you've created, all the stuff that you can't bottle up and look at. You can look at a photo, but a photo won't give you the feeling what you experienced at that time.
Yeah. And I do like Dr. Wayne Dyer. You've reminded me I should listen to him more. And I do remember him likening that. And I've heard the seasons being used as well. So, but he's right. Well, we were conditioned. He says it was a lie. I say we were conditioned into believing there's a big expectation of what happens in our 20s and what happens in our 30s, what happens in our 40s. And then everything else after that is just bundled into whatever that's bundled into, third gen or whatever. No, we're all living longer, healthier lives. Well, the majority of us, not all of us, I appreciate that. There are other things that get in the way, but we're all doing much better than we were 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
well,
absolutely.
We are, unfortunately, getting towards the end of our time, but I think that for my last question, what I'd like to ask you is, what would your one piece of advice be for someone who's listening to this podcast, but actually our ramblings as well, because this is going quite deep, and actually they're not sure what to do next. What should they do next?
Pause, stop, reflect, and I say those words because that sums it up. A lot of people, many people, will jump. And they will jump into the same situation that they're trying to escape from. And that's great. And it will work for some people. But what they are in danger of doing is recreating the same problem in a different way. So by pausing, by stopping and reflecting, just checking out what's going on for them so that they get it right next time. And there are a number of different things out there on the web you can look at as to how to carry out, some sort of life audit. I've got that in my book, but if you look up the Wheel of Life online, lots of exercises online where you can start to understand what's going on for you and where you want to go. So, I think it's just pause. That's the big word.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been lovely. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, good. Thank you. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.